Today we're doing completing the square. We're going to do two problems. One problem is going to be x squared plus 8y minus 2 equals to 0. Okay, so the first thing that you need to remember about completing the squares before you start anything is two things. A formula which is going to be b divided by 2 squared. And the b is what it is in standard form, so that is the middle term. And the other thing you need to look out for before you start completing the square is to make sure that the leading coefficient is 1 or another number. If it's 1, then we're going to do it this way. If it's not 1, then we're going to do it in problem number 2. So the first thing you need to know is that we are solving for the x-intercepts when we're doing the completing the square because there is a 0 there, and so the y is 0, and therefore it's the x-intercepts. So we're trying to get x by itself. We're trying to solve for x by completing the square. So the first thing that you want to do is move the 2 over to the other side. So you're going to get x squared plus 8y equals to 2. So that actually helps us a lot because now we need to fill this part in. So this is what we're looking for, filling that part in on there. And so that's when we start completing the square. And so we take the b, and so you're going to take this b divided by 2 and square it. And then you get 4 squared. And the reason why I like keeping the 4 in there, because that 4 is actually going to help us later. So I want to keep it there. And then the answer here is going to be 16. So that 4 is a special 4. We don't put the 4 in here. We actually put the 16 in there. So it's a positive 16, so we do plus 16 here. And if we do it to one side, it's like a balancing act. If I do it to one side, then the other side is off balance, and we have to balance it again. So that's going to be plus 16. So now, when we complete the square, that means we made it into perfect squares. This is always going to be, this part right here is always going to be squared, so it's always going to give us a perfect square. So this one here is always going to be a perfect square. So all we need to do is put in the x, and I know it's going to be squared, and there's only going to be an x right there, and the reason being is because the leading coefficient is 1, so x times x is going to be x squared. Now the term that we want to put in here, that's where our highlighted 4 is. That one always goes in there, so that one's going to be it's a positive 4 in there, so it's going to be a positive 4 in here. Of course, you could always factor it and say, what two numbers, when I multiply them together, give me 16, but when I add them, give me 8. And they're always going to be two of the same numbers. It's going to be x plus 4 plus x plus 4 times x plus 4. So you're going to have two of the same things. So this is just the easier way. Whatever is inside here is always going to be what goes in there, the both highlighted. And so then we get on this side, we get 18. Now we're at the point where we could do the square root method. So now, because this is squared, I want to solve for x. I want to get x by itself. So we're going to take the square root of this side, and we're going to take the square root of that side. So that's going to cancel, and we're going to get plus 4 is equal to, well, when we take the square root, it's actually, remember, it's a quadratic, so we're expecting 2 answers. In this case, we get the 2 answers by putting the plus or minus in there, because when you take the square root and you're taking the square root of an unknown, you could either have the positive value or the negative value. The other thing about the 18 is that it's not simplified further, where I know that inside there is a perfect square being hidden, so it's 9 times 2, and so then we get plus or minus, the perfect square is going to be 3 square root of 2, and that's how you simplify a radical. And we take the 4 over, and so it's negative 4 plus or minus 3 square root of 2. And if you notice, there's actually 2 answers in there. X is equal to negative 4 plus 3 square root of 2, and x is equal to negative 4 minus 3 square root of 2, and those are the 2 answers. If you did not remember from previous math courses how we simplify a radical, go ahead and repeat these steps on there, or actually you could look that up. In Khan Academy would be a good site. Okay, problem number 2. Now, problem number 2 is going to be a little bit more difficult because now we have a leading coefficient that is not 1. So what we're going to do here is leave some space. This one's already in the form where the 3 got moved over to a negative 3 on the other side. So that one's already done for us. So in this case here, B is 8. But because the leading coefficient is not 1, you have to factor that out of there. So you're going to have x squared plus 4x and then equals to negative 3. So now we factored out a 2 from this whole entire thing on the left-hand side. So the new b is actually 4. A lot of students make the mistake and actually factor do the formula b over 2 squared to the 8, and that is not correct. So what you do is you still take the formula. You're going to take the 4 divided by 2 squared is going to give you 2 squared, which is equal to 4. We're still going to do the same thing with this one in here. And what you're going to do when you have this here, you're going to put in a plus 4 in here. Now the question is, did I really add a 4 in there? And the answer is actually no. Because what you do is you do 2, when you distribute, you're going to get 2x squared plus 8x plus 8. So in the left-hand side, even though we put a 4 in there, what we really put in was an 8, not a 4. So if I put an 8 on the left-hand side, I have to put an 8 on the right-hand side. So that's where you have to be careful. One, if it's a leading coefficient, there are some things that change the problem throughout it, and so you have to be careful with that. Okay, back to the problem. So in this case here, now this is a perfect square, so we could factor it nice and easy. So I know it's going to be x, I know it's going to be square. I look at my highlighted part, I know that's going to be a 2 plus 2 equals to 5. Now I cannot take the square root of both sides right now because there's still a 2 there. So before I could take the square root, I have to divide that over to the other side. Now I could take the square root, and so I take the square root of this side, take the square root of that side, and it's plus or minus. X plus 2 equals to plus or minus the square root of 5 over 2. And then what we want to do is we can't have, and the answer in the book does not give us an answer with the radical in the denominator. So the way that you change the radical is you multiply the top by the square root of 2 and the bottom by the square root of 2. So you get x plus 2 equals plus or minus square root of 10 over 2. And then we move the x over, the 2 over, and you get negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 10 over 2. And I'm out of room, but if you notice, this is 2 answers, the plus and minus. So you would say negative 2 plus the square root of 10 and negative 2 minus the square root of 10 over 2. Okay, any questions on that? Please review this again and do it as many times as you need it. Of course, I'm always available after school to get help. All right, thank you.